You're listening to Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions on product and business strategy. And now, here's your host, Bob Caporelli.
Welcome to another episode of Dear Strategy, where we answer all of your questions about product and business strategy. Real questions from real people in real companies, just like yours. Welcome back, strategy creators, to episode 99. We're counting it down. We have one episode to go before episode 100, some type of a big milestone somewhere, I'm sure. We'll see what we do for that one. But for now, we're going to focus on this one. And before we get to today's question, again, as usual, let me give you a reminder of the company that sponsors this show, the company I owned and founded and work for, Strategy Generation Company. You can go visit us at strategygeneration.com to learn about the tools, workshops, toolkits, videos, all kinds of different resources we have to help you and your teams develop better product, business, and marketing strategies. We are 100% dedicated to the process of strategy development. So if you need help in that area, want to learn more about what we do, please go out and visit us at strategygeneration.com to learn more. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and get to today's question, which I'm going to jump right into. And it is, Dear Strategy, how do I better assess what should be the trigger level for reviewing and potentially updating my strategy? So this is really interesting the way this is worded, because I think, you kind of get a visual that you put a strategy in place and then you execute on it. You kind of leave it alone until something happens, right? And then once something happens, you got to go back and revisit it and do it again. And although I understand why that sentiment might exist, kind of why that might be the viewpoint, it's really, in practice, not the way that I recommend doing things. Now, I think this comes from the fact that, companies, mostly large companies, even small ones, I should say, if they have a formal strategy process of any type, they're usually going to refresh it once a year. And frankly, it's usually kind of a big deal, right? So I know in the companies that I used to work for sure, we would have our strategy process sometime usually in the February, March timeframe. And it would be a big thing. All the product managers would put together their product strategies. The business unit leaders would put together their strategies based on those product strategies. And everyone would be, kind of putting this together for the executive teams and presenting it there. And some people would get beat up. Some people would get pat on the back, be a big approval process. And it was usually a 1 to 2 week process as far as the presentations go, because it was a big company. But the preparation was immense. I mean, we started preparing for these presentations probably sometime in January, because, product manager getting in front of the CEO of a $2, $3, $4 billion company, that's kind of a big deal, right? And so it was a big milestone. And then they get approved, they get not approved, they get tweaked, whatever. And then the next process that happens is kind of in the September, October timeframe, where you're starting the planning for next year's budget or annual plan or whatever you want to call it. And then that cycle just continues, strategy in March, annual budget in October based on the strategy, and on and on. So I find that a lot of big companies do that to some extent, some more formally than others. And because these tend to be pretty big events, the fact is that most of these strategies, they get refreshed no more than once a year, right? Because you kind of get through the big presentation, you breathe a big sigh of relief, wipe the sweat off your forehead, and then you go out and do your job, right? And kind of forget about the strategic planning process until next year, in which case we're going to start preparing all over again. And although I get why that happens in big companies, and it's kind of a natural evolution based on the way that these processes work, I don't think it's the best way to do it. Now, I do think that big companies should sponsor strategy processes. I do think that people should formally present their strategies to leadership. But the way that I like to look at it is, don't make it into a huge, big refresh, start from scratch exercise every year. What should be happening is you start with a plan, strategy of some type, and you execute it. And as you execute it, you're constantly reviewing and going back to the plan, sometimes revising parts of it based on what went right, what didn't go so right. And so your plan evolves throughout the year so that when you get to the annual budgeting process in that October timeframe, you're using the most updated version of your plan as a baseline for next year's budget. And then when the strategy refresh comes the following year in the February, March timeframe, again, you're just giving people an update of the plan that you're already executing on. So it's not like you have to start from scratch and have a 2-month preparation period or things like that. You just kind of roll, right? And this really kind of equates to the way strategy works in real life. If you think about the origins of strategy back to the military analogies that we've done several times on this show, that's what military strategy is going to be. You put together a plan, you start to execute on that plan. When you get out on the battlefield, if things aren't going the way that you thought that they should, you're going to make changes. You're going to make revisions, sometimes in real time. Sometimes you're going to retreat and start all over again, but you're certainly not going to just keep going with a strategy that's not working and say, well, that's what our plan says. So, we're just going to do it. And then, sometime next year we'll redo it again. It's like just not the way it works. Same thing if you're playing football or sports or anything else. You go out with a plan, and then as the plays unfold and you see what really is happening versus what you thought would happen, you start making some changes on the fly. Same thing with chess, right? Another very strategic game. Same type of a deal. You think you know what you're going to do, you put a plan together, and then as moves start to happen that you didn't actually anticipate, you start to make revisions. Now, usually those revisions are tweaks. They're small revisions. They're tactical revisions. Sometimes the whole strategy is failing, and then you have to go back to some of the initiatives and change some of those initiatives and change some of the overall plan. Sometimes you have to go back to the goals and say, maybe our goals were unrealistic. Sometimes the investments that you thought you were going to make are things that you can't make anymore, so you have to change things that way. So there's always tweaks that are going to happen. And you hope that you've built your plan in such a way that can allow you to tweak from the bottom first. In other words, tactics first. And then if that's not working, you change one of the bigger initiatives. If that's not working, then you change one of the goals. But no matter what, you're not waiting a year to make changes. You're changing as you need to change. So coming back to the answer to this question, what are some of the trigger points? I think it's being asked around like there's some big trigger point that you should be watching out for, and there's just not. The trigger points are whatever is happening in the marketplace that you didn't anticipate properly. And whenever those changes are occurring, whenever and wherever they're occurring, you have to go back and revisit your plan and make whatever changes you need to make. So that's the way I would look at it. And think about it like this. When you put a strategy together and you do your analysis, you're really analyzing both what's going on right now and what you think is going to happen in the future. So if what's going on right now starts to shift dramatically, then obviously you need to make changes to your plan. If what you thought would happen in the future isn't happening the way that you thought it would, then you have to make changes in your plan. Or maybe your plan isn't working and it's not allowing you to get the goals that you need. Then you need to make changes in your plan. So any one of these can be trigger points to any degree. And you just have to pay attention to all of them. So my shorter answer is don't worry about one singular trigger point. Go ahead and execute your plan and make whatever changes you need to make based on what's happening at the moment. Now, that doesn't mean to be spastic, right? Which again is why we do build strategies in layers. So you have your goals, you have your high-level initiatives, you have your lower-level tactics. So you should be able to vary those tactics without changing your entire plan. But sometimes you do need to change your plan, and that's okay. So you just have to be aware of what the changes are in the marketplace and then react to those accordingly. Okay, so that's the answer. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, if you have a question that you want to be featured here on the show, please go visit us at dearstrategy.net or dearstrategy.com. They both work. Go to the Ask a Question link, should be up in the upper right-hand corner, and you can click on that. It'll take you to a contact form where you can ask a question to be featured on the show. You could also leave us feedback, and you could also leave us feedback on any one of the blogs that we write that go along with each one of these episodes. So be sure to go check that out, all at that same site, dearstrategy.net or dearstrategy.com. So while you're doing all that, don't forget to make time for the plan. We'll see you back here on another episode of Dear Strategy. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for listening to Dear Strategy with Bob Caparelli. To learn more or to submit a question to be featured on our show, please visit us at dearstrategy.net.